Well, the good doctor, Dr. Rany Jazayerli, is finally ready to go here for another edition of the Kaufman Corner podcast. Of course, Rany, one of the co-founders of Baseball Prospectus. My name is Soren Petro from Sports Radio 810 WHB in Kansas City. We're going to talk hitting coaches first. Out, Keone Durena, Joe Dillon, Drew Saylor down in the minor leagues. In, still, Alex Zumwalt. What do we think of the hitting this year? What should the takeaway be? Are the Royals handling this right? We'll get into that. We're also going to break down our prospects. Rany and I each had a 12 prospect list, 1 through 12. We ranked them coming into the season. How did they shape up? How did our kind of predictions, if you want to call them that, end up looking when it was all said and done? We'll break that down and talk about it. If there's time, don't know that there will be. We'll get into some of the free agents, the Royals' own free agents, not outside, just if there's any they need to keep. If there's time, we'll see. It's coming up right here, right now on the Kaufman Corner podcast.
You're listening to the Kaufman Corner podcast, the most in-depth analysis of the Kansas City Royals, breaking down the Royals like no one else can. Kaufman Corner is hosted by Rany Jazayerli and Soren Petro. Rany is a co-founder of Baseball Prospectus, author of Rany on the Royals, and a former columnist for Grantland, The Ringer, and The Athletic. Soren is the award-winning afternoon drive host of the program on Sports Radio 810 WHB in Kansas City. Kaufman Corner is proudly brought to you by Gann Asphalt and Concrete, Kansas City's nationally recognized full-service paving and pavement maintenance contractor, making parking lot problems disappear in Kansas City since 1994. Free consultations, no commissions, in-house crews, and every project comes with a written warranty. Find them online at GannAsphalt.com or call 816-484-3338. Gann Asphalt and Concrete, one contractor, all things parking lot. And now, here are your hosts, Rany Jazayerli and Soren Petro.
Thank you very much, Curtis. Off and running here on another edition of the Kaufman Corner podcast. Remember, if you're catching us via the podcast, you can be a part of the conversation. I got a number of people lined up here in the chat room. Chat with your fellow Kaufman Corner fans, Royals fans. It's a sense of a community is what it is, Rany. A sense of success for hitting when it comes to the Royals. Actually, I think everyone would say no based upon the total run score, but there were some successes in here. So you are not on a Cal Eldred-like mission to plunder and pillage everything. They've already made some moves, as we talked about, but how do you want to open your thoughts on the hitting of the Royals and where they're going right now with the moves they've already made?
Well, I mean, now that the dust has sort of settled, I mean, we don't know who they're bringing in, but the Royals have made a statement of intent, right? So I think now we can talk about, with the distance of a few weeks from the end of the season, we can sort of take a 30,000-foot view of the state of the offense, like of the Kansas City Royals in October 2025. And yeah, I mean, I want to emphasize, I mean, for as much as you and I have talked about the disappointment on the hitting side and how that was on some level the story of the season, this is not in any way, shape, or form a Cal Eldred level disaster, right? When the Royals mercifully fired Cal Eldred at the end of the 2022 season, they were coming off of a season in which the pitching staff ranked dead last in the American League in basically every pitching category imaginable. Runs allowed, walks allowed, fewest strikeouts, most home runs, most hits. It was historic. I think I said at the time, the only other team in the last 60 years to have accomplished that combination of finishing last in so many categories was the 2006 Kansas City Royals, which was the reason why Dayton Moore and JJ Piccolo and all these guys got hired in the first place, and they were back to square one. And the point is that what Cal Eldred was in 2021 or 2020 or even 2019 might have been more comparable to where the Royals are now. But by the end, it was a nuclear wasteland. This is not the same in any way, shape, or form. Yes, the Royals finished last in the American League in runs. Almost finished, they should say. They finished last in the American League in walks. They finished 13th in runs. But what's really interesting about the arc of the season was there was, if you look at the superficial numbers, there was a lot of improvement from the first half to the second half, in the sense of, if the Royals hitting coach Alex Zumwalt had been, let's say he had been hired at the beginning of the season, you and I right now would be praising that person for the degree of improvement the Royals showed from the beginning of the season to the end. And just to run through a few numbers here.
Are you, wait a minute, can I just ask a question before you get to the numbers? Are you just getting soft?
No, no.
Is that what's going on here?
No, I'm getting nuanced, which is my default state, right? And here's my point: is that if I made a mistake, there's one thing I regret when I went off on Dayton Moore, sorry, not Dayton Moore, JJ Piccolo 2 years ago, right? Was that at the time the Royals were 26-67 or some god awful record, but he was in his first year as general manager, and if the Royals had hired a general manager from outside the organization with a mandate to clean house and start from burn things to the ground and start over, I wouldn't have batted an eyelash at what the Royals record was. And obviously what happened was I was holding the sins of the previous administration, which was included JJ Piccolo, but was not him in the decision-making chair, against him, right? And I think it's been made very clear to us over the last couple of years that JJ Piccolo is not Dayton Moore, and he actually does things quite a bit differently and sees the game quite a bit differently than Dayton Moore. So I just want to make the point that, like, with the perspective of looking at where the Royals hitting coach, where the Royals hitting situation is right now, like if they had brought in Alex Zumwalt to start this season, there's actually some good evidence here. The problem is I'm not holding the sins of a previous administration against them. I'm holding the sins of Alex Zumwalt against him, because the Royals offense has been disappointing or below average pretty much, every year of his tenure, with the possible exception of 2024. And we'll get into why that is in a moment. But I just want to point out that, like, they did get better in the second half. So let me run through the numbers. The first half was almost a Cal Eldred-esque disaster. They were dead last in the American League in runs scored at the All-Star break, dead last in the American League in home runs, dead last in the American League in walks by 37. That's a ton of the next to last place team had 37 more walks at the All-Star break. That's an enormous gap. They were 9th in batting average. Okay, that's the one thing the Royals always do well, because they emphasize contact. In fact, they had the second fewest strikeouts in the American League. That's the one thing they did well, is they made contact. But they were an awful, awful offense. After the All-Star break, we talked about this before, 3rd in runs, which is shocking, but okay, the team, all the teams were kind of compressed. Like, 3rd wasn't that far away from like 9th place. Like, we had been 10, 15. Right. But still, 3rd after the All-Star break. More impressively to me, 5th in walks in the American League, 7th in home runs, 4th in batting average, fewest strikeouts in the American League. And I do want to come back to the walks one more time. 5th in the American League in walks after the All-Star break.
Yeah, but 5th in the American League. I mean, that's
5th out of 15 teams. Yeah.
Yeah.
It doesn't sound like much, but we've talked
about light years from where this organization usually is, but
not usually, it always is.
Yeah.
Like, we've talked about, like, the Royals have not finished in the top half of the American League in walks in a full season since 1989, when a guy named Kevin Seitzer drew 102 walks for the Kansas City Royals. They finished 5th. But okay, half a season. Well, you figure in a half season, somewhere along the way, the Royals must have finished, in the top 5 in the American League in walks for half a year, either before or after the All-Star break. Well, I spent like an hour and a half today going through half by half every season in Royals history to see, like, is 5th in the league in walks really that big a deal to do for a 70 or 80 game stretch? And let me tell you, it is. The Royals have finished, just very briefly, last year, 14th in the league before the All-Star break, 14th after the All-Star break. The year before, 14th and 14th. 2022, 9th and 11th. That 9th is the highest. That was the first half of 2022, before the All-Star break. That is the highest the Royals have ranked out of 15 teams in the American League since there were 15 teams in the American League. They have not finished higher than ninth, even for a half of a season, since 2011. Before the All-Star break in 2011, they were fifth in the American League in walks, like they were in the second half of 2025. Do you remember who the hitting coach was in 2011?
That gets back to Kevin Seitzer.
I didn't say his name. You said his name. Okay. So fifth in the American League in 2011. Before that, you have to go back to 1997. After the All-Star break, they were also fifth in the American League in the second half only. Like we're talking about they haven't had a better job in terms of plate discipline in even a 2.5 month stretch. The last time they were better, I believe, was in fact 1989, the same year that they actually finished the whole season fifth in walks. They finished fifth in the first half of the season, fourth in the second half. So it sounds like, oh, big deal, fifth out of 15 teams for half a season. The Royals haven't done that in 30, they haven't done better than that in 36 years. They haven't done even this well in 14 years. And, they haven't done this well without Kevin Seitzer being somehow involved since probably 1977, when they were second in the American League after the All-Star break in walks. Every other team has had Kevin Seitzer involved in some capacity. So, I mean, again, if Alex Zumwalt had just been hired last offseason, I'd be looking at these numbers and be like, oh my God, we finally found somebody who's emphasizing plate discipline. Now, if you break it down by month, it's actually more interesting to me because, like, by month this year, they went 13th in the American League in walks in April, dead last in May, dead last in June, still 13th in July, which passes the All-Star break, and then 4th in August and 7th in September. So actually, if you want to say, looking at the timeline, the person seems to be most responsible for this is Mike Yastrzemski, right? Like who, came in on August 1st and set the tone, in so many different ways. And obviously he himself walked, I think, 25 times in 186 plate appearances, which is a phenomenal rate. But I mean, it wasn't just him. Nick Lofton, who remember was leading the minor leagues in walks when he was called up at the end of May, had 4 walks in 129 plate appearances to start the season. And then in mid-August, he suddenly started walking and actually finished with a decent walk rate. Not a great one, but 14 walks on the season, 180 plate appearances. And then, of course, Jack Caglione in September, who had never shown the propensity to take walks at any level, college or minor league, because he didn't need to. But after walking, I think 4 times in July and 4 times in August, he walked 10 times in September. So it did start to spread around the team. But the point is, there was a change in the approach of the Royals. The problem, though, is they dug themselves such an enormous hole in the first half of the season that for the season, they still finished 13th in runs, dead last in walks by 33. They finished dead last in walks by 37 in the first half. They narrowed that gap from 37 to 33 at the end of the year, but they were still last in the American League in walks. And, just like they count all the games for the whole season in the standings, you got to count all the games when you're looking at just how much plate discipline this team has. The one thing that they do incredibly well, though, is they did not strike out. They finished in every month of the season. They were either first or second in the American League in fewest strikeouts. The other team that was with them every step of the way was the Toronto Blue Jays, who obviously are playing in the NLCS right now. The Royals finished the season, I think, with 3 fewer strikeouts. They finished with 1,096. The Blue Jays finished with 1,099. Every other team in the American League finished with at least 1,300 strikeouts. And I think I missed this because, the Blue Jays were right there, but those two teams separated themselves in terms of strikeouts by more than 200. So the point is, there is some. There's, I mean, if you look at these numbers, you're like, there's clearly a philosophy here to emphasize contact. And we talk, for as much as Alex Zumwalt talks about swing decisions being so important, the swing decisions got better as the season went along, because in the second half, they were 5th in the American League in walks and 1st in fewest strikeouts. You show me a team that strikes out less than every other team and also has the 5th most walks in the league, that's almost guaranteed to be a quality offense. And they were a quality offense for the last 2 months of the season. It's just that I don't know if 2 months is enough time to say this is for real or just a fluke.
Well, that's the question, isn't it?
Yep.
And what was and so then you mentioned the strikeouts. I mean, that was one of the things that JJ Picollo said in the exit press conference was, we led the league in fewest strikeouts. We've got to figure out if that's a bad thing. So why do you think what's your conclusion? You're concluding in theory, it's obvious. Oh, not striking out. That's a good thing. Except for why would he pose that question?
Right, because if it comes at the cost of also the fewest walks in the league, also the fewest home runs in the league.
There you go.
Right? Like, look, the 2014-2015 Royals had a case. This was made not by Royals fans, by analysts at the time, as maybe the greatest contact hitting team relative to the league in terms of their strikeout rate since World War II. Like, the Royals went to 2 World Series on the basis of contact hitting. And then, of course, you look back at those playoffs and how many times did the Royals win a game in the playoffs because of shoddy defense by the other team after they put the ball in play, right? So it worked so beautifully that I think they almost fell too much in love with that philosophy. And I think we have to account for the fact that they might have just gotten really lucky in terms of all that contact mattering, because like what wins in the playoffs is still power. Yeah, if you can not strike out and hit for power, I mean, what the Blue Jays are doing, the Blue Jays had just as good a contact rate as the Royals, but also hit for a lot more home runs and had a higher batting average because, home runs don't count as balls in play. So if you can not strike out and hit home runs, your batting average is also likely to be higher. They were the 4th in the entire major leagues in runs scored. But the Royals, like, the way to do that is to get good hitters. The problem is I think the Royals sometimes emphasize contact at the expense of quality of contact. And that, I think, is what hurt them this year.
And you mentioned the Blue Jays being right there. And I think the thing that needs to be pointed out is the Blue Jays were 11th in home runs and the Royals were 26th.
Yeah, 100%.
So, which speaks to your quality of contact.
Right.
They weren't striking out, but they were having much higher quality of contact than the Royals.
Right.
And so, I mean, I think the conclusion is, there's a little bit of, Dayton Moore's, when John Sherman said, well, I'd like to see what a wild card team looks like. When he said, Dayton Moore's always talking about a championship team. We've said it many times, poor choice of words, the way John Sherman phrased it. But what he was getting at is Dayton Moore's kind of always swinging for the fences to try to get these superstars and try to put what he thinks is a championship caliber team. I think there's a quicker, faster path to getting to the postseason. And I don't think you have to always, do the things he does and have these huge swings. And I'd like to see what the wild card team looks like. That was his point. That's what he was getting at. And I think part of it is like, you can, the contact. I remember saying about the Royals team in 14, I don't know if they're going to get there, but if they get there, they're going to be hell on wheels because they put the ball in play. Right. And so when all the guys who walk guys around the bases go away and all the take and rake guys have to swing the bats, well, they're going to have a problem. And the Royals are used to swinging the bats, and the guys are going to be in the zone. So they're going to get more contact and they're going to be a tough out. We've seen that happen before. But the question was, could they get there? And in my opinion, they had 5 years in a window where they were good enough to be a playoff team, and they only got there twice. And I think that's where the flip side is, well, let's have 5 years where we're good enough and let's get there 4 times. And then let's see if one of those times we just, can push through.
100%.
That's the philosophy. And now the question is, are they going to change if they're firing all the guys? Like, they're giving all the credit to the late season push to Zumwalt and apparently putting all the blame of anything that didn't happen to the other guys. And that's, that could be a problem.
It certainly means that if things don't turn around, there's only one guy left to blame, right? So we all season, when we talked about, we kind of danced around it, but basically we're saying, the Royals need to make a change at hitting coach. We used Alex Zumwalt by name, but Alex Zumwalt was always shorthand for the Royals hitting department, right? Like the group as a whole. So if you ask me, am I satisfied with what the Royals did, right? Even though they didn't fire Alex Zumwalt, what I would say is what my huge fear was, and maybe this goes, I think that this is still kind of, my brain is still kind of traumatized by the Dayton Moore era of denial at the end, where I was terrified they would just not acknowledge that they had a problem and they would continue to do the same thing that they've been doing for years. But obviously we get to the end of the season. Yes, they announced Alex Zumwalt was going to stay, but then we find out Drew Saylor and Alex Zumwalt's names were like, tied together at the hip when they were first brought into the organization 5-6 years ago. Like it was always Zumwalt and Saylor and Zumwalt, to the point where sometimes I had trouble remembering which one was the major guy at the major league level. And I think Zumwalt was originally brought in as like the minor league hitting coordinator, and that Drew Saylor then took that title when Zumwalt got promoted mid-season in May of 2022 to be the major league hitting coach. But Drew Saylor let go. Keone Durant, who was also brought in at the same time as Drew Saylor, also let go. And then Joe Dillon, who was brought in, I think 2 years ago, I want to say, was, let go at the same time. But if you look at the Royals, they're on Royals.com, like their front office directory and coaches directory, as far as I can tell, there's 4 guys whose title has the word hitting in it. And it's Zumwalt, Saylor, Duran, and Dillon. And 3 of those guys have lost their jobs. So, like, from this simple standpoint, did the Royals acknowledge that they have a deficiency and are moving aggressively to address it? I have to conclude the answer to that is yes. So even if Alex Zumwalt's in the job, I feel satisfied they are taking the lack of performance on the offensive side. They're giving it the attention that it deserves. Now we have to wait and see who they actually hire. But I'm satisfied that they have, acknowledged the problem, and hopefully they hit a home run the way they did with their pitching hires 2 years ago. And obviously we're going to wait to see who they hire and what organizations they hire from. But I'm hopeful that they're going to bring in some new voices, some new ideas, and, start the process of changing the way they approach hitting.
All right, let's real quick. I want to ask you a couple questions on that. We'll also want to get to our prospects. We'll do it after we hear from our friends at Gann Asphalt and Concrete. Gann Asphalt and Concrete, proudly serving the greater Kansas City area. Nationally recognized full-service paving and pavement maintenance contractor. Locally owned and making parking lot problems disappear in Kansas City since 1994. Let Gann educate you about the most cost-effective way to solve your parking lot problems. With free consultations, no commissions, in-house crews, and every project comes with a written warranty, Gann Asphalt keeps your parking lot safer and helps you and your business avoid unnecessary delays and costly expenses. Find Gann online at GannAsphalt.com or call 816-484-3338. Gann Asphalt and Concrete. One contractor, all things parking lot. Italian Delight was the first restaurant to bring true New York-style pizza to Kansas City almost 50 years ago. They sell whole pies or pizza by the slice, or enjoy their classic strombolis, calzones, and sausage rolls. Sandwich lovers, check out their lineup of hot and cold subs, the combo, the meatball, or the Philly cheesesteak, just to name a few. And don't forget the pasta. Their famous lasagna and classic chicken Alfredo always hit the spot. If you're hungry for lunch, check out their daily lunch specials, starting at under $10. Italian Delight can even cater your next work function or party. Dine in, carry out, or delivery, it's Italian Delight. Located just 3 minutes east of Kansas Speedway at 8145 State Ave in KCK. Check out the menu and order online at ItalianDelightKS.com. Kansas City's own Italian Delight. Northland Injury Law, Kansas City's Google 5-star rated personal injury lawyers, serving KC for more than 40 years, voted Kansas City's #1 accident lawyers, helping people with serious injuries from car accidents, work accidents, falls, and other personal injuries. Northland Injury Law doesn't get paid unless they get money for their client. Don't wait, get compensated now. If you have a case, text HURT to 22222. That's HURT to 22222, or call 816-400-HURT. That's 816-400-4878. The choice of a lawyer is an important one and should not be based solely upon advertisements. All right, Rany, I want to ask you this. You run a business, right? You're a I almost called you a pharmacist. You're a dermatologist, and you have a practice, and you have many people under you. Like, how could everybody under you be doing everything wrong, but you're still doing things right? Can you give me a management scenario? Like, that's what, and I'm not saying, listen, we have a team of a few guys. I don't manage a whole big department, so I'm not qualified on this. And I've got 2 guys that are great, and do everything, without really needing, much direction at all from me. They're just good at what they do. So I'm asking legitimately here. It's not a loaded question. Like how that's the part that I think is hard to get your arms around. It's like you wonder, is Alex Zumwalt just, he's part of the crew. He's one of the guys. So we're not going to let him go, but we're going to broom everybody underneath. Like, makes sense to me how that fits, how that works.
Yeah, I'm not sure because, like you said, I mean, if everybody that I've hired is incompetent at their jobs, then at the very least it means I'm incompetent at hiring people, right? And look, I've run my practice now for over 20 years. I'd like to think I've gotten better at the hiring side of things, because I certainly know I have made mistakes. I've definitely hired people that I've come to regret, and sometimes letting people go it's a long and painful process to sort of let them earn their dismissal. Um, and so you hope the next time you don't make that mistake. But yes, if I hire incompetent people or people who are not motivated or people who don't get along with their coworkers, on some level that's going to be a reflection of my ability to hire the right people. And so much of business, right? I think there's an expression, 90% of business is hiring the right people and then staying out of their way and letting them do their jobs, right? I think the argument here is, I don't know to what extent Alex Zumwalt was responsible for the hiring of all of these people versus JJ Piccolo versus, in some cases, Dayton Moore, and other people in the organization. I mean, Zumwalt has been in the organization a very long time. In fact, if you recall, he was the one, I think he was an advanced scout at the time, who was the one who picked up on Jose Bautista's tendency to hit the cutoff man at second base, which led to the Royals sending Lorenzo Cain home in Game 6 of the 2015 ALCS. And by the way, Mike Jazayerli, thank you for your service. He was awesome. We don't have time to get into his retirement, but I just want to make a shout out to one of the ultimate glue guys in this organization for like decades. Right. But that play was made in part because Alex Zumwalt was considered very good at his job at the time, which is completely separate from being a hitting coach. So he's been in the organization a long time. The other guys were not here as long. So could there be an instance of, like you said, he's one of the guys and maybe he's getting a pass? It is possible, but all of those guys were hired from different organizations. Like, it wasn't like Zumwalt brought them in, like he was hired and he said, sign my buddy here, sign my, that I worked with at the other organization. I think Duran was with the Cubs. I know Dylan was signed. He had been working for the Washington Nationals. I think Saylor might have been with the Pirates and Duran with the Cubs, or vice versa. And actually, in retrospect, I mean, simply
the Dodgers.
Well, they worked on multiple organizations, but I believe that's where they had their last stop. And I will say, I mean, just look, those teams. Okay, the Cubs are one thing, but like hiring guys from the Pirates and the Nationals, not sure. That's kind of like when the White Sox decided like they had to hire every member of the Royals front office, and then went out and set a modern major league record for losses in a season. Like, I mean, it's a silly thing, but like that's why I'm saying whoever they hire now. They hire, John Doe. I'm going to have no idea is John Doe good at his job. But if John Doe is hired from the Dodgers or the Milwaukee Brewers, I'm going to have a lot more optimism than if he comes from the Nationals or the Pirates, right? Or the Colorado Rockies, God forbid. I mean, one of the reasons why we were optimistic when they hired Matt Quatraro and Brian Sweeney was the pedigree of organizations they had worked for. And that has borne fruit wonderfully, I think. So I think that's the one area where I'll give Zumwalt a pass is I don't know how much impact he specifically had in those hirings. I assume he may have a lot of input into these hirings, but really my hope is that the Royals cast a very wide net, talk to a lot of people in a lot of organizations. And I know last time, again, 2 years ago or 3 years ago now, we were kind of frustrated at the slow pace that the Royals had with hiring their manager and hiring their pitching coach. But honestly, like in retrospect, if it meant that the reason for that slow pace was they were not leaving any rock, unturned, then it was absolutely the right thing to do. So I'm actually in the mode now where like I'm not feeling a sense of urgency that they need to replace all three of these guys in the next week or two or even month or so. Like if they take until the winter meetings, if it means hiring the right guy and it means interviewing 20 different guys from 10 different organizations, whatever, that's fine because it was a jackpot last time. And if they hit a jackpot this time, they've covered over the biggest weakness this organization has.
All right, let's move on to our prospects, our preseason prospect rankings. I will just tell you, this is going to be a lot of names, right? That we're going to throw at you. What do you want to do? You want to go through them 1 through 12, 12 through 1?
I think we should.
You want to just pick out the highlights of like how things have changed?
Well, I mean, the reality is so many of these guys, you have a list of 12, I have a list of 12, and something like 9 or 10 of the players on your list are on my list and vice versa. So it's, I think we should just we could almost go player by player, just go with the top rated player whose name hasn't come up. We'll talk about where we ranked him and then what his status is now versus last year. I mean, what we're looking at, some of this is, we want to dunk on each other if we've done a better job, but I think more this is a good way of
Rany. Let's be honest what this is. That Rany wants to take yet another victory lap for putting Carter Jensen at the top of his prospect list. That's all this is about.
I have no idea what you're talking about, Soren. Just because I had Carter Jensen number 1 and you didn't, I mean, no, maybe that's part of it. But that's, well, for one thing, we're going to change things up next week when we do our rankings, prospect rankings for the upcoming years. We're actually going to draft players each, so it'll be a little more competitive. But to me, I want to just use this exercise as a way of saying, is the farm system in better shape today than it was a year ago? Like if these guys have moved forward, great. If there have been a lot of disappointments, then we may have to reconsider that. So I guess you already put it out there. So we'll start with Carter Jensen. I had him number 1. You had Carter number 3 on your list. Not like you didn't like him, but you had him in a different order. And I mean, he is just an absolute, A+ of a season for him in terms of performance, in terms of where, what the industry thinks of him now, in terms of where he has put himself in the Royals' future. I mean, a year ago, you could make an argument that he was not considered a real cornerstone part of the Royals' future because they thought Blake Mitchell was going to be that guy. And I think that is completely turned over. And we're talking about Carter Jensen being on the roster and maybe in the lineup and maybe catching on opening, probably not catching on opening day, but like he will probably be the DH on opening day and he might catch the second or third game of the season next year.
I will point out that he was third on my list, but I had Jack Caglione first, who was called up to the big leagues, right, to play, and is no longer has prospect status. And then I had Blake Mitchell number 2, who got hit on the hand, right? So, enjoy your celebration. You might look like a fool.
I'm not really trying to dunk here because again, I had Caglione 2, and we talked about this.
And you had Blake Mitchell 3, so we had the same 3 at the top,
right? And I think back in July, I was kind of like making fun of the fact that like, what was I thinking having Carter Jensen ahead of Jack Caglione? I mean, 2 months ago, 3 months ago, certainly, like that. I think I was defending it by saying we did this so early. We hadn't seen Jack Caglione's performance in the Arizona Fall League where he started putting up exit velos of 115 and above. If I'd known, Jack Caglione was hitting balls that hard against, prospect caliber pitching, I would have probably flipped them as well. It's just that from July to today, Caglione's stock has dropped and Carter Jensen's has shot through the roof over the last 3 months.
Yeah, I do think that you can look at this and say, number 1 is Jack Caglione swinging too hard. Like those exit velos are great, but against big league pitchers, he's not making enough contact, right? And so,
it's funny you mention that because we were talking about contact before. The problem wasn't he wasn't making too much; he was making too little contact. The problem was he was hitting too many ground balls by the end. Like his strikeout rate,
he's not making enough good contact, right?
And that gets back to what we were talking about. Like they emphasize contact. Caglione is a guy I wouldn't mind his strikeout rate going up a little bit if it means instead of hitting 7 home runs in 70 games, he hits 35 in a season.
Particularly if it's him taking a high strike, at the, that's on the black up top on a pitch that he can't handle because too many times we saw him pop those up or the ones that he would, like you said, beat into the ground. yes, I would agree. But I do think, with the three of them at the top, we can kind of just lump them together. Blake Mitchell, it was a lost year because of the hamate
Right. I
bone.
mean, that was a very disappointing season, but we knew
But
going
we
into
knew
the
it right
season,
off the bat.
right. The hamate bone broke, and his plate discipline was good. He still had like a 350 OBP, but he had a slugging of 292 or something. I'm
Which you
disappointed, but
said
I'm
would
not
be the case
right.
when it happened. So
And
we're
that's
not
why it's like I can't hold. It's a mulligan. It's a lost development year, and that's never good. But I don't look at him and be like, oh, he's a bust. Like, oh, we were wrong about him. No, he was hurt. He played
Yeah.
hurt. He's going to be in the Arizona Fall League this year, and I'm very curious more than anyone else there. He's the guy I'm really looking to see scouting reports and see signs that his power is coming back. His bat speed is there, etc.
So I just wanted to address that. So that's kind of the Blake Mitchell story. But I do think it's of note that, yes, while Jack Caglianone got up earlier, I think they forced him up because the big league club was in contention and they needed him. They needed somebody, and he was a Hail Mary toss of like, well, maybe he'll figure it out quick and we'll have his power. But there's no doubt the way Carter Jensen finished the year at the big league level that he blew by Jack Caglianone. Okay, I do want to, while I'm talking about how well Caglianone got called up, I acknowledge Carter Jensen right now looks like the better bet to be a consistent bat. I will say this: I'm going to feel better if they figure out the catch. Like at some point, they got to start moving some pieces around, or I'm just waiting for Carter Jensen to go buy an outfield glove, and I don't think that's then a lot of this starts to change.
Right.
Because you're going right back down the same old road.
The boldest move the Royals could make this offseason, if they can pull it off, and this is where the injury complicates things, but if Blake Mitchell looks like he's back to normal in the Arizona Fall League, you want to make a trade for like some major league ready talent, like hitter wise or whatever. Blake Mitchell is absolutely the guy. I mean, right now, this is, just remind you, one more time, we had MJ Melendez and Salvador Perez, and the Royals just seem to not be aware of the fact that you can't start two catchers at the same time. The Royals still have Salvador Perez, but now they have two top catching prospects. I mean, arguably the top two prospects in the system are catchers, right? So you can't play them both. So it makes a lot of sense. The question is, can you get proper trade value for Blake Mitchell coming off an injury like this, coming off a bad, performance statistically? But if that deal is there to be made, I think you jump on it.
Yeah. All right, let's go to the next guy on the list. On your list at number 4 was Ben Kudrna. What do you want?
I mean, he was having a good year in Double-A until he got called up to Omaha late in the year, and it was a disaster in four appearances. I mean, he walked 17 batters in 11 innings, and like suddenly there's questions about him again. Like I feel like he's been making slow, steady progress his entire career. He was in the same draft as Carter Jensen. He's not old. He's only 22 years old. I still like him as a player, and honestly, his overall numbers are very, very similar. His walk rate, his hit rate, his home run and strikeout rate, almost identical from last year to this year, and he moved up a level. So I think he took a small step back, and I'd like to know what happened at the end of the year. I just want to make sure he's healthy, but it wasn't a bad year. It just wasn't a step forward like I'd hoped.
Yeah. Next up on my list was Austin Charles. He was at number 4 on mine, shortstop. Was in Quad City at the end, 205, 264, 298. Backing up as far as where he ranks on the list. And part of that's just because they've got a whole other draft class that's gonna add in there. But I mean, I don't think we saw the kind of progress that they'd probably hoped for out of Austin Charles, and I think he's definitely been passed.
He was always a developmental guy, like a guy who's going to take a while. He was a high school, kind of project. He's a huge 6'5", 215. Seems to have settled in at third base, but he still plays some shortstop. Like that, he's a guy where if all the tools come together, you're talking about like a monster guy, right? But
it's your one of trying it, and the tools didn't come together.
Not this year, not at all. I mean, and I had him 6th on my list. Like we were very high. These are shades of.
By the way, I had Kudrna at 7. So
right, exactly. So I mean, these are minor things. But yeah, Austin Charles, the year before he had 257. He showed a good walk rate. The year before he had a 353 OBP in low A ball. Stole 36 bases, hit 10 homers. He went from that to he missed half the season, but he only hit 2 home runs, and hit 205.
And had a
guy this tall,
base.
with the guy who's this size to hit 2 home runs, the swing is still, it's not there. And you talk about, if you're wondering why the Royals fire their, hitting coordinators at the minor league level and kept Alex on. Well, I mean, Austin Charles would be one example.
Yeah.
And again, he was coming off. He missed half the season with an injury. Maybe that contributed, but it didn't help. Yeah, he had a bad year.
The next guy we'll talk about is Javier Vaz. He was 5 on your list. He was number 11 on my list. Injury again, part of the equation with him. But there was some thought that maybe I had the thought that maybe he was going to be able to, factor into the big league club this year. That did not even come close. And so much so that all their moves tend to make you think that they don't see it with him.
Yeah. On the one hand, his overall numbers at the end of the year, he had a 375 OBP in Double A in 2024, and that was one of the reasons why we're so excited. I mean, a guy who can play second in the middle infield and gets on base and more walks than strikeouts. He had 73 walks, 60 strikeouts. That was what we were betting on. His overall numbers this year, I mean, his OBP was 360. He had more walks than strikeouts again.
But he's 25 years old and still in Double A.
He was repeating Double A, and he was already old for his level. That's the concern that I have with him. Now, I will say he was much better in the second half than in the first half, and he broke his fingers on a pitch back in spring training and started the season a couple weeks late. A broken finger is not the same as a broken helmet bone, but if you were to tell me he wasn't 100% until midseason, I might not argue with that, in which case there's still some reason for optimism. Like, I actually still have some optimism. Javier Vaz can be a utility guy, can be a good bench player at the major leagues. That kind of plate discipline, more walks and strikeouts is not something you see very often at any level in baseball. So it was a down year for him, but with some caveats. I don't feel his stock has dropped as much as someone like Austin Charles has, for instance.
Yeah. All right. Next on the list, Ramon Ramirez. Catcher for me was at number 5.
Yep. I had him at number 9. I'll give this one to you because, especially relative to some of the other guys in the system. I mean, he moved up from rookie ball to full season ball, A ball. And the bat was still kind of played. I mean, he's not a high average guy. He's a catcher, but good plate discipline and good power. He hit 11 homers and slugged 442. He turned 20 in June. He played half the season as a teenager. I think the guy's bat will play. My number one concern by far with him is I don't know if he's a catcher long term, because for the second consecutive year, he threw out fewer than 20% of base runners trying to steal. He played 39 games behind the plate for Colombia, allowed 89 stolen bases, so 2.5 steals a game, and only threw out 19 guys for an 18% rate, caught stealing rate. Now, the rules in the minor leagues, a lot of those, rules have been they're playing around with to make it easier to steal bases, to encourage speed, and to try them out to see if those rules should be adopted at the major league level. So the number of steals, everybody tries to steal at the minor league level because teams want to see which ones of their players can learn how to do it. But the fact that they were successful 82% of the time, if he's not a catcher, the penalty for moving from catcher to first base or wherever he's going to end up is huge. So I still think he's a good prospect. I don't think his prospect stop has dropped, but it's just the variance is enormous with him.
There is, and he needs to stay behind the dish. I agree, for him to have the value. By the way, he's listed as 9th on one of the prospect lists but he would be 5th amongst guys that we've talked about here. So that kind of puts him where I had him, is kind of where he is, because the other guys that have come in there are guys off this year's draft: Sean Gamble, Josh Hammond, right. Guys that have emerged. So of this order, he's still 5th. I'm counting Jack Caglione as being above him as well.
Right, exactly.
And so that's where he is. Next on the list that we have not talked about is my number 6, Noah Cameron.
You want to take your victory lap here?
Yeah. I mean, and he was, we did our what our predictions were coming in, and he was my impact rookie and everything. But, I mean, he continues to show, one, why you can feel so comfortable in their pitching, department and what they have and how they do things, because, they're, absolutely fantastic when it comes to developing the pitching side of the things. So from that standpoint, I think, he's he validates Brian Sweeney. He validates that they can identify pitching. He validates that they can develop it. But and he's not a soft tosser, right? Like he's more than that. And so, yeah, I think for sure it's a big statement for them. You know,
Yeah,
I mean,
no, absolutely. And I had him 10th on my list, so like I didn't ignore him, but you had him higher. And if there's a lesson I could take from this, I mean, the two things. One is like, yes, I whatever reservations I still had about the Royals pitching development process a year ago, that's pretty much evaporated. Like he's the final nail in that coffin. If you had any skepticism, and also I think just we acknowledge the reality that like Omaha right now is very much a hitter's environment. And in retrospect, I mean, he had decent numbers in Omaha in 7 starts this year, and then got called up and was much better. But he was actually better at Omaha when he got called up there late last season, 2024, than he was this season. Like in 9 starts last year in Omaha, he had a 2.32 ERA, he had a WHIP right around 1. I mean, he was fantastic, and I think did not take into account the fact that like the hitting environment in Omaha is so good for the hitters that it actually made his performance even more impressive. Um, and so I think I was underrating him. And then the final thing though is, he did show up in spring training with a little more zip on his fastball. And, I think I wish I had the really high quality pitch data from AAA from last year to compare, but I do think his fastball velocity ticked up just a little bit
oh
this
yeah,
year. And that made for a guy who was like my complaint against him was he was fringy. Like, did he have the stuff? He had the pitchability, but did he have the stuff? Well, the stuff ticked up, and that made such a difference for him. So
next highest guy, yeah, for sure. Next highest guy, number 7 on your list, Steven Zobak.
Yeah,
Just 25.
Let's not talk about me having Steven
rough
Zobak
go.
ahead of Noah Cameron. Like that's a miss. And I mean, the big thing is he was hurt as well. He missed the first 2 months of the season, came back. It was a lost year. And I think, it's easy to forget about him completely. And, if he is 100% next year, I still think there's a lot of upside there, but he had a bad year. And he had, he's right-handed, so his velocity is probably a little bit better than Noah Cameron's, but from a right-hander, it's not. I think Noah's is probably more notable. But his command was better. He had at least an ability to throw strikes. But Noah has the better off-speed stuff, and I think that what happened this year is he came back, his velocity was not quite there, and if he was fringy, the stuff ticking down just killed him. So he needs to rebuild that. And I'm hopeful he will. But yeah, his career is very much in jeopardy at this point.
Yeah, because age-wise, it's time to go.
Yeah,
I mean,
he's going to be 25.
Which, speaking of which, takes us to our next number 8 on your list, number 9 on my list, Gavin Cross.
Yep.
There was hope. I remember people telling us, why don't they just bring up Gavin Cross? Was one of the things we heard. 241, 291, 413 for 704 OPS, and is now what 24. He'll soon be 25. He'll be 25 before next season starts. I mean, where are we at? He repeated Northwest Arkansas and backed up the bus.
Yeah, he was. His OPS dropped from 770 to 703. Despite not going up a level and being a year older. And to me, when I heard the news about Saylor and Duran and Dillon getting, especially Saylor, I think getting the axe as the hitting coordinator for the minor leagues, Gavin Cross was a guy that the name that came to mind as, okay, if they're going to point at somebody who's really a disappointment, the question is he really a disappointment in terms of development, or did they just do a poor job of drafting him in the first place? The one thing I will say about him, if there's still a glimmer of hope, is he was awful the first half of the season. Like he was a disaster. He had a 509 OPS in April, 480 in May. But from that point on, he was actually much, much better. I mean, his OPS from June 1st on, his average, he hit 291 with a 345 OBP and a 496 slugging from June 1st on. So he almost slugged 500. Maybe there's still something there, but even then, a 24-year-old slugging 500 at AA, your best bet is a platoon bat. He might be John Rave in 2 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what we're looking at.
Okay, that's fine, but like that's not top 10 pick status. And I do not expect him to be on either of our top prospect lists when we do ours next week.
Gavin Cross was number 8 for you, number 9 for me. At number 8, I had Blake Walters. And you did not have Blake Walters on your list. And I don't remember, did he just miss? Were you down on him?
He just missed. I mean, my concern was high school guy, and the Royals had just had a really bad history of drafting high school pitchers under the previous scouting regime. Obviously, we'll get to next year's list with. Oh, actually, we'll get to a guy on my list that was a Brian Bridges high school draft pick. But that was my concern, and the fact that like the command still wasn't there, he threw hard, but I wasn't sold on the breaking stuff. So
well, and he has no control. Yeah. I mean, he's walking way too many guys. 40 walks and 47 innings.
Well, the walk rate almost doubled from last year to this year.
So and he was a guy that there were, he was kind of the name that you're hiding from everybody is David Shields. And, he was David Shields before David Shields. He was the guy, oh boy, they got one here. This is the guy. And it has not been that. To me, he's barreling, we're going to be talking, reliever here pretty soon. They clearly have to strip away some pitch. And then maybe he'll come quick and be a power arm, out of the bullpen, but that's where that one's
right. I think the thing I'll say is there still seems to be quite a bit of optimism in him within the organization relative to some of the other like high school guys they've taken over the years. And I do think that if he goes like I'm no way writing him off as a future major league pitcher, but I do think his future is in the bullpen. And he's only 20. I think he turns 21 in a few weeks, but like this is not a guy you write off completely. But I do think the upside, the best case scenario seems to be very unlikely at this point.
Yeah. All right. We've got 2 more guys to go. David Shields was on both of our lists. He was number 11 on yours, number 12 on mine, amongst names that we have not yet mentioned. And this guy's a bullet.
We've gotten to, there's 2 guys on this list that were drafted by Brian Bridges. Jack Hegley was the first, no longer qualifies for this list, but I don't think his stock has gone down from a year ago, regardless of what he did in the major leagues. And then David Shields, whose stock has gone up as much as anyone in the organization. Certainly anyone who was in the organization when we did this in October, like Henry Churio was, I think, signed in January. So, and obviously they had draft picks this year, but David Shields was a projectable. Put the emphasis on the second syllable. He was a projectable guy a year ago, and now there's still projection there, and yet the performance is just undeniable. So, huge step forward. He will be much higher on this year's list, and he's one of the reasons why we have such hope for the organization's ability to identify amateur talent today relative to 2 years ago.
Yeah. All right. And the last name on the list you had, because I had David Shields at 12, you had Spencer Nivens at 12.
I did. It was, kind of a shot in the dark for the last guy on the list, because Spencer Nivens famously led all of professional baseball in home runs in August of 2024. The name right behind him was Aaron Judge. So completely out of the blue, after hitting 6 home runs all season going into August, he hit 13 home runs in August, and I guess 2 more in September. So 15 home runs from August 1st on. And it was just, that was kind of hard to just ignore. The guy slugged, 475. He hit 20 home runs on the season. And I'm like, well, he can build on that. He's young. He'll be 23. He's moved to AA. He went to AA this year. He hit the 6 home runs, and that was for the whole season. That was the whole season. His slugging went from 475 in A-ball last year to 346 in AA this year. And
the problem is the doubles. It's like if you'd seen like, oh, his doubles were way up. It's like, okay, so the ball's not going out of the park because the pitching's better, but he's still hitting the ball hard and into the gaps. That wasn't the case either. 17 doubles last year, 20 this year, in almost 100 more plate appearances.
And he's a corner outfielder. Like, look, the plate discipline is good. Like, maybe again, this is another guy who could be like a 4th outfielder if everything pans out. But it was, again, it was the last guy on the list. I'm gonna go for a guy who there's an upside scenario here, which is a starting everyday outfielder. But that does not seem to be the case. So
yeah. So in the end, what do you look at this and come away thinking?
I mean, if you look at this, the names on this list overall, I would say it would have to be a disappointment. I mean, Carter Jensen and Jack Caglione. The one saving grace is that there are more successes at the very top of the list. Like the fact that Caglione and Carter Jensen seem to have taken a step forward does alleviate a lot of the disappointments here. But you've got a couple of big injury question marks in Blake Mitchell and Javier Vaz. And then you've got a bunch of, you've got some of the pitchers who didn't come through in terms of Zobak and Ben Caderna maybe a little bit. But it just takes Jensen, Caglione, and Noah Cameron might be, and then David Shields with a bullet, like you said. 4 guys who elevate their prospect standing that much almost makes up for 8 guys whose prospect standing has gone down. And so it's a disappointment, but not a huge one. And especially when you factor in that the successes of the 2024 draft and the 2024/25 international scouting class, which we may get to a little bit next week as well. I feel like the farm system is in a slightly better situation than it was a year ago, even as they've graduated Noah Cameron and Jack Caglione into the major leagues. You know what I mean? Even as they managed to take some talent from the farm system to help them stay above 500. If you take a step back from this organization, it's actually really remarkable to me that they've had back-to-back winning seasons and have a farm system that is slowly moving up the rankings when you consider that they were universally considered to have a terrible farm system as well as 106 losses or whatever 2 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's clear that the new brain trust is going in the right direction. And you feel like, okay, they're going to start stocking the system. Problem is it takes a long time.
It does.
For guys to get up there.
It does. And that's why, to me, it's like while they're waiting for that to happen, the fact that they've been able to find talent, some of it in the organization, some of it from outside the organization at the major league level to be competitive 2 years in a row, make the playoffs once, be above 500. It's really, I think the industry maybe appreciates it, but I'm not sure like the typical baseball fan realizes what an impressive job Gigi Piccolo has done, with his front office the last 2 years. The Kansas City Royals are not, like, they may not be a marquee team. They're never going to be a marquee team, but like they're perfectly respectable. And they were not respectable 3 years ago. Right. From top to bottom right now, this is a decent organization, which
I would go even further than that. I think they've got work to do on the hitting, and I think Jack Caglione having his struggles at the big leagues really calls into question the hitting side of things because they had their struggles, so many struggles early on, and the run total at the end of the year. I know you give all the stats that after the All-Star break, which is about a third of the year, the numbers ticked up, and that's a good sign. You'd rather have them going up than going down. But I think then you couple that Jack Caglione couldn't get going.
Right. Caglione to me was really if the Royals were at all on the fence, it was the fact that Caglione came up and struggled the way he did that had to make it clear they had to make a change.
But the pitching side, I mean, everything that could be a positive is a positive. I mean, they get people from out of the organization, they make them better. They bring people up in their organization, they make them better. The depth that they had to go to for the rotation, I mean, it was the exact opposite of last year where they just ran out the same 5 guys virtually the entire year. And then Lorenzen in for Alec Marsh at the end. It was the exact opposite. They had to deal with a lot of attrition, and they kept putting guys in there, and they kept being successful.
100%. A year ago, you could at least say it's possible the Royals have just been incredibly lucky to have the pitching performance that they had. You cannot make that case this year. This year, they proved it's not luck. They were doing it with too many guys and dancing around too many injuries. We reached a realization that, yes, the Royals have really I have a tremendous amount of confidence in their ability to develop pitching. I have as much confidence as I have had since that incredible prospect class of 2011, the 9 top 100 prospects or whatever. Probably the last time I felt confidence in the Royals' ability to identify amateur and bring in amateur talent as I do now with Brian Bridges on the domestic side, and then the combination of Rene Francisco and Daniel Guerrero on the international side. The only thing I had the only thing I didn't really have a lot of confidence in, was the ability to develop hitting, and they are addressing that head on. So that's why I feel as good about the organization as I have in a long time, because if they get the hitting right, what's the biggest weakness as an organization, right? Like they're always going to be a team that's not going to have a top 10 payroll, but I think that the impact of that is overstated. I think that they absolutely can win and be very competitive in the American League Central without that. So what's the concern? They don't run the bases well. They'll figure that out, right? Rusty Kuntz is still out there somewhere, right? Like they just got to solve the hitting side, and if they do, and they start bringing in, and we're gonna know pretty quickly with Josh Hammond and Sean Gamble, next year. Those two guys will be an excellent litmus test for their ability to identify amateur talent and develop it on the hitting side. Because the hitting, we know they got the pitching done, but their top 2 picks were hitters. I want to see how that goes.
Yeah, Randy said it. Next time we'll basically be ranking X number of players by drafting them. We're going to go back and forth, kind of a snake draft, 1, then 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, and just kind of put it together and see where that takes us and how the list ends up looking for the Kansas City Royals. Listen, you can always support the Kaufman Corner podcast by supporting our great sponsors like Gann Asphalt and Concrete. They proudly serve the greater Kansas City area. They've been making parking lot problems disappear in Kansas City since 1994. If you own or manage a business and you have any kind of problem in your parking lot, whether it's something as simple as just striping or seal coating, hey, the weather's getting cooler. Even the weekends are booking up fast. Book right now with Gann Asphalt and Concrete. Go to GannAsphalt.com. That's GannAsphalt.com, or call 816-484-3338. Tell them you heard about them right here on the Kaufman Corner podcast. One contractor, all things parking lots. Our friends at Italian Delight, our buddy Renee was in the chat room tonight. Of course, the fine owner, he and his family, owning Italian Delight, first to bring true New York-style pizza to Kansas City almost 50 years ago. Enjoy their strombolis, calzones, subs, lasagnas. They got a daily lunch special starting at under $10. Check it out. Just 3 minutes east of Kansas Speedway on State Avenue, 8145 State Avenue. You can order online at ItalianDelightKS.com. And, of course, our great friends at Northland Injury Law. They've been helping out folks that have been hurt in an accident for 40 years. If you have a case, text HURT to 22222. That's HURT to 22222, or call 816-400-HURT. Voted Kansas City's #1 accident lawyers. It's Northland Injury Law. For the good Dr. Rany Jazayerli, I'm Soren Petro saying thank you very much for joining us here on the Kaufman Corner podcast.